Welcome back to the Story of Liberty. This is John Coloma. Remember the gold rush back in 1848? Well, it all started when John Marshall noticed a little piece of metallic in the water that was sparkling. He lifted it up to the sun, and sure enough, he started yelling, "Boys, I believe I have found gold." He rode into San Francisco one morning and began shouting up and down the street, "Gold, gold on the American River." And the gold rush was on. You know, at first it was localized. It was just friends of friends who had actually come and filled up their little pouch with gold nuggets. But after a while, others learned about it and started coming. You could simply come and claim an area or work. You could work for a gold nugget a day, which was worth about $16 compared to the average salary of $1 a day. So looking for gold earned 16 times as much. And to be a prospector on your own, all you needed was a shovel and a pickaxe, a crowbar, either a dish pan or a fry pan that would be good for panning gold, and of course a tent and a bedroll to stay out in the wilderness there for 3 or 4 weeks. You needed some food. And if a Bible wasn't in your package, you probably had a bottle of whiskey. But as it turned out, these camps grew and grew as more and more prospectors came out. And their names kind of show you and reflect what life must have been like in these camps. Flapjack Canyon, Murderer's Bar, Hell's Half Acre, Whiskey Bar, Humberg Creek, Gomorrah, and Gaujai. Well, let's just say it may not have been principled, but there were enough Christian men there to keep things civilized. And eventually, the area grew and grew more and more. Well, eventually the word got out nationwide when Lieutenant Edward Beale, he returned to Washington. And this was the word of a career naval officer, so nobody doubted it. He had a little can of tea that contained 230 ounces of gold. And that day, for the first time, the Washington papers printed the headlines, "Gold in California." And the telegraph wires were humming. Papers around the country were picking up this news that there was this incredible bonanza taking place out in California. Suddenly, gold was on everybody's mind. Anybody could be a prospector. It didn't matter who you were or where you came from, what your background was, or how educated you were. All you needed to know, you could learn in 15 minutes. And in the beginning, you didn't even need to own any land. You just needed to stake a claim, register it, and start working at it. And whatever you found was yours. There were accounts of many millionaires with their gold finds, and the word began to grow. It was interesting that the historian Page Smith called it the greatest movement of people in modern history. See, it was the most remarkable immigration in the history of man since the days of the Crusades. The move from the east to the west. It was amazing because all across America, young men were looking to find tools they could work with to find gold. And the end of the rainbow did seem to have a pot of gold in it in Northern California. But the truth is that this gold fever, it brought incalculable damage to the fabric of American families and society in general, because families were torn apart, neighborhoods were decimated, because men were just picking up, leaving their jobs, leaving their families, to go find their pot of gold. Well, the ministers of America began preaching out against the gold rush. They were trying to persuade husbands and fathers to stay home, take care of their families, and be happy with their jobs, and to resist the temptation to go become rich, because they had God-given responsibilities and obligations with their families at home. But a lot of men still went, and there were three ways to get out there. It was a long road, a long hot road if you went at the wrong time of the year, or cold. You could hop on a boat and go around Cape Horn and up the Pacific coast to San Francisco, and that would take as little as 2 months. But it was very expensive. It could cost $1,000. And rounding the Horn was a very dangerous approach. You could literally spend weeks out there fighting the gale force winds. And a number of boats were never heard from again. Well, and the slowest way was overland, along the wagon trails, opened and guided by mountain men. And that was less expensive. That was about a third of the cost, of about $300. But it was very dangerous. And it could take 3 to 4 months. Well, the one thing in common to all of them was impatience. They wanted to get out there. Gold fever was contagious, and it caught man in its grip. You know, men could do crazy, terrible things, even risking his life, the lives of his family, or even taking another man's life. They were in a desperate hurry to go find their pot of gold. It was difficult no matter which way you went. Several hundred Americans were stranded in Panama City, watching their money run out as ship after ship refused passage. Hundreds of men had been lost in the treacherous seas around Cape Horn, and thousands upon thousands died on the trails and up in the high mountain passes. There were stories of the 49ers overworking their teams and watching them die off one by one. But there was no discouraging them. In fact, it gave lyrics to a song written by Stephen Foster.
My banjo on my knee, I'm flying to Louisiana, my true love for to see. It rained all night the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to live, Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee.
Remember that song? But anyway, that song came out of the gold rush. A number of new arrivals quickly concluded that significant money could be made in the local economy that supported the miners. So you could actually sell food, clothes, boots, and tools, horses, whatever they needed, and make a 50% profit. Lawyers used to brag how much money they charged their clients. Well, as time went on, as expected, the gold was getting harder and harder to find. The miners were digging deeper and deeper and smaller claims. And by the end of 1853, the fields were pretty much played out, and the 49ers returned home finally. All told, more than 300,000 men eventually joined this great movement westward. They say less than 1,000 actually struck it rich, though. But most enjoyed the experience. When one considers how the discovery of gold in California happened at this time, you think about the providence of God. Had it been found 3 years earlier, California was still the property of Mexico. That would have changed things. It would have meant a move of Mexicans north instead of Americans to the west. Had the discovery been 3 years later, California could have been embroiled in the slavery whirlpool and might not have become a state as quickly as it did. But it's interesting that perhaps the greatest significance of all of this California gold rush was that now the United States of America was geographically complete. Whether you think this was in the plan of God or not, it seems now that America had stretched from sea to shining sea. It joined America as a nation. It populated America all the way to the West Coast.